You know, have you ever really stopped to think about how you think? I mean, how you actually make sense of the words on a page or the news that pops up on your screen? Well, today we're going to dive into this incredible story about a truly revolutionary idea. A philosophical earthquake, really, that completely changed how we understand interpretation. And trust me, it affects how you see the world right now, probably more than you realize.
So just look at this question. Seems simple, doesn't it? But seriously, can you answer it with a mind that is 100% objective? A mind that's totally free from your past, your culture, your experiences? For a really long time, the answer was thought to be a clear, confident yes. But that whole foundational idea was about to get turned completely on its head.
Okay, so to get what a big deal this was, we've got to travel back in time a bit, to the Enlightenment. This was an era that basically put human reason up on a pedestal. The big idea back then was that our minds, if we just used them correctly, were these ultimate tools for discovering objective truth, totally free from all the dogma of the past.
The core idea, and it's a powerful one, was that our minds could work like perfect mirrors. The thinking went, if we just polished them enough, got rid of our personal biases and traditions, they could reflect the world back to us with perfect, crystal clear accuracy. We could know things not just as they seemed to us, but as they actually were.
And you had these brilliant thinkers, guys like René Descartes, who were really the pioneers of this whole rationalist movement. They argued that true knowledge could only come from pure, logical reasoning. Descartes' whole thing was that we had to start from a place of radical doubt, just strip away everything we think we know, and build our understanding from the ground up, based only on what we can clearly and directly observe.
So here is the game plan, right? The key was to become a totally neutral observer. The interpreter, the person reading or observing, was supposed to be like a dry sponge, just ready to soak up pure information without adding any of their own color or flavor to it. So you doubt tradition, you push aside your personal feelings, and you just let the facts speak for themselves.
And this idea was just perfectly captured by the philosopher John Locke. He famously described the mind as a tabula rasa, which is Latin for a blank tablet or a blank slate. And the idea is just that. We're born as these clean slates, and all of our knowledge is just passively written onto our minds by our experiences out there in the world.
Now, this all sounds pretty good in theory, doesn't it? I mean, who wouldn't want a pure, objective search for truth? But let's just pause for a second and really think about this. Can a mind that thinks and feels and remembers and has lived all these experiences, can it ever truly be blank? Well, that very question set the stage for a huge, dramatic shift in Western thought.
And the person who answered that question with a thunderous no was this German philosopher, Immanuel Kant. And what he proposed was so radical, so game-changing, that it's often called a Copernican revolution in philosophy. Why? Because just like Copernicus showed the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, Kant was about to show that our minds were the center of our knowledge in a way no one had ever imagined.
Okay, now get this, because this slide really lays it all out. The rationalists saw the mind as a passive mirror, just reflecting what's out there. Kant comes along and flips that completely. He argues the mind is way more like a projector. It doesn't just see reality, it actively structures and shapes it before we're even consciously aware of it. It's not passive, it's active.
So Kant's big argument was that we could never, ever know a thing in itself. The raw, unfiltered object just existing out there. We can only know things as they appear to us, after they've been processed through this built-in grid of our minds. And this grid includes these fundamental concepts we just take for granted, like time and space. We don't just see a bunch of events. Our mind automatically organizes them into a sequence, a timeline.
So here's kind of how it works. Step 1, raw data from the world hits our senses. What we see, hear, touch. Step 2, our mind instantly, without us even trying, organizes that data using its internal rules. And step 3, what we end up actually perceiving is not raw reality, but an organized, structured, and, this is the key, a fundamentally filtered version of it.
And this was just a massive turning point. If the mind isn't just a passive receiver, well, then the whole focus of interpretation had to change. It could no longer be just about the objective text or the data out there. Suddenly, the interpreter, the knowing self, was thrust onto center stage.
Just think about the implications here for a second. If my mind is actively shaping what I see, then to really understand what someone else has written, I kind of need to understand their mind, right? The psychology of the author, what they intended, their worldview, all of that suddenly becomes incredibly important.
And this brings us to Friedrich Schleiermacher. He's often called the father of modern hermeneutics, which is really just a fancy word for the theory of interpretation. He basically took Kant's ideas and just ran with them. For Schleiermacher, reading a text wasn't just about grammar and words, it was a psychological act. The real goal was to dive deep into the author's mind and reconstruct their original thought process.
This quote just nails his whole approach. He believed that because we all share a common humanity, we can sort of bridge that gap across time, put ourselves in the author's shoes, and try to see the world through their mental grid. And in doing that, we can grasp the meaning they were trying to convey. So you might be thinking, okay, that's interesting, but why does a debate between a couple of long-dead German philosophers matter to me today? Oh, it matters. Because Kant's revolution, it didn't just stay in old philosophy books. Its legacy is literally all around us, shaping how we talk about everything from science and religion to art and politics.
Let's just break this down. First, Kant's ideas help create the split between the world of faith and the world of history and science, a divide you still see today in debates about miracles or the historical Jesus versus the Christ of faith. Second, putting the knowing self at the center, that paved the way for modern literary theories where the meaning of a book is partly created by the reader. And maybe most importantly, his work really hammered home that pure objectivity is probably an illusion. We all bring our backgrounds and biases to everything we see and read.
So, that's the journey we've been on. We started with this big Enlightenment dream of being a blank slate, a perfectly clear window looking out onto reality. And we ended with the Kantian realization that, well, we can't actually take off our glasses. We all see the world through a lens that's colored by the very structure of our minds.
So, the next time you read an article, or you watch a movie, or you're just having a conversation with someone, ask yourself this: what are my built-in categories? What's the mental grid, that inescapable filter that I'm using to make sense of all this? Because just acknowledging that it's there, well, that's the first real step to understanding anything at all.